Hello, everybody. A warm welcome. My name is Akiko, and I am currently leading the UN RED program, Sustainable Forest Trade in the Lower Mekong Region Initiative. And today, I'm very, very happy to welcome you all to this dialogue, our second regional dialogue that we're holding together. So for the agenda that we have for today, it's a three-hour dialogue. And we're going to start off with a very short session, 15 minutes, to walk you through the regional trends. The subtitle we have for this session is Seeing the Forest for the Trees. In other words, we want to zoom out and show you a little bit about what we see about the region and the forest sector in terms of statistics. What we mean is we're going to listen exactly to the supply and demand actors that are engaging in the forest trade in the Lower Mekong region. We'll have a number of speakers representing the demand side, as well as a number speaking for the supply side. And then we'll go into a panel discussion. And then the last session is reflections. And again, this is a 15-minute short session reflecting on what we have discussed today. So these are the objectives. And then what we really want to do with this whole session today, the whole dialogue today, is share insights for synergies for our program and for this whole discussion, this whole agenda that we have about a sustainable and more legal supply chain in the Lower Mekong region that also addresses our climate change agenda synergies. Okay, so this is a slide to introduce to you the participants. That who we have in the call today, in the dialogue today, are national stakeholders from the 5 Lower Mekong countries. We have Chinese buyer companies, we have regional banks, we have people representing the smallholder perspectives, and we have our forestry investors and partners. These include CITES, FSC, GGSC, ITTO, Pfc, RECOFT, WWF, and we have our donor Norway, and all our team from UN RED, including from our headquarters, from FAO, and from UNEP, and from the regional office, as well as our country offices. Our expected outcome for the whole event is that by the end of the dialogue, the participants will gain a deeper understanding of the regional trends on timber trade, including challenges, opportunities, and solutions for sourcing sustainable timber in the region, with a focus on smallholders and SMEs. Here, I'd like to hand over to Alexi for these next 2 slides.
Thanks, Akiko. Hi, everyone. So my name is Alexi. I work for UNEP together with Akiko and the team on the project. So this slide is just to give you the links to all the videos, all the presentations, agenda, any resources that were developed to prepare this dialogue. So you will have that in the chat, and you will also find that in a document, the frequently asked question. Okay, over to you. Back to you, Akiko. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexi. And without further ado, I'd like to open our regional dialogue, inviting 2 keynote speakers to deliver their opening remarks. First, Mario Boccucci, our head of the UN RED Secretariat. Over to you, Mario.
Everyone from Geneva, and I'm very, very happy to be here with you. I'm very grateful for all of you to have made the time for this important dialogue. So what I'm going to offer are some reflection based on the vantage points that I have from the work that I do. And just to say that my work started more than 30 years ago. It's always been in the natural resources, forest and agriculture. First with the European Commission, then with the World Bank, and for the past decades with the United Nations. During that trajectory, my heart and my work has been there with you for many years. In 2020, I was based in Jakarta for more than 8 years, and in Sumatra, working on precisely the type of things that we are going to discuss today. And I was very proud to be able to contribute to the first ever forest law enforcement and governance conference that took place on the planet. I was in Hanoi exactly 21 years ago. So that's the vantage point that I offer, having worked at the global level, but also with my foot on the ground and my perspective at the regional level. So I want to offer 3 quick reflections. The first one is that this is the time for forest solution, right? Forest is getting a level of visibility and attention as a solution to the climate crisis, to the biodiversity crisis, to the development crisis, and is getting a level of support that we have never seen before. I want to give you 3 quick data points to substantiate this point. The first one is what came out of Glasgow. You will have seen the Glasgow Declaration on Forests signed by more than 140 countries, but there was an accompanying Glasgow pledge of more than $20 billion of support to forest solution. The second data point is the fact that we're seeing a strong attention to forest and agriculture commodities. You will have seen the FACT dialogues that were launched, the US and China bilateral that specifically refer to supply chains. And the third data point is the role of indigenous people and local communities. The recognition that those communities are the stewards to conserve, restore, and sustainably manage forests was also very strong in Glasgow. And again, another 1.7 billion of support has been announced. So this is the time for forests, was my first message. The second message is UNRED is here for you. We have launched into our next phase. We have our work plan for the next 4 years approved by our board and with also generous contribution from Norway. On the work plan, we speak about the whole set of forest-based solutions, conservation, restoration, sustainable management. We look at both the supply side and the demand side, and we work at the global, regional, that is very important, and country level. So UNRED is here for you. That was my second message. My third message, having said that this is the time for forest solution, having said that UNRED is here for you, my third message is that you can make it happen. The stakeholders, the variety from government to civil society to international and regional organizations, private sector representatives that are here today is exactly what is needed to join hands and make it happen. I just want to, in the last 30 seconds that I have, suggest 2 things. The first one is that you communicate and you bring the evidence of the good progress that you are making. You bring it up. The leadership, the global and regional leadership has to see that to be reassured that good progress can be made and is being made. And my second suggestion is that you use the powerful arc of travel of 2022 to bring up the evidence and get even more support. There is the G20 with the presidency with Indonesia. There is the World Forestry Congress. There is COP27. These are all powerful stages to bring up the good progress and the good initiative that you're doing in the region. Thank you so much. I wish you all the very best. And back to you, Akiko.
Inspiring and forward-looking opening remarks. I'd like to now invite Leif Jan Fosse from NICFI of Norway to give opening remarks from you. Over to you, Leif Jan.
Good morning, and thank you, Akiko. Thank you so much for that. I'm honored to speak to you today on behalf of the Norwegian International Climate and Forest Initiative. That's an initiative that sits in the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and Environment. It was set up back in 2007 to deliver on a promise our Prime Minister made back then to spend up to $300 million a year to conserve, restore, and forest, as referred to by Mario already. UNRED, by the way, is one of the key tools in delivering on this initiative. But let me get to today's topic. The second regional dialogue on sustainable forest trade in the Lower Mekong region. Very happy to be part of this effort, which is now, I can tell from the resources being made available to participants, the full panoply of stakeholders that are participating today. We're now talking about a mature program. Very happy to see that. We are also very impressed by your ability to keep the program moving in times of severe constraints. in which we appreciate, of course, in terms of meeting and traveling and all the technicalities and challenges relating to working together under this sort of stress and strain. At the same time, we are, of course, eager to see clear documentation. We are talking about forest trade, of course, clear documentation of the willingness of governments in the region to strengthen their efforts of reducing illegalities in the sector. That is, after all, the core purpose of the dialogue as well as the program as such, which is a sum of the efforts of all the stakeholders participating today. We are also happy to see the program increase the level of dialogue within the region. That is one of the purposes, of course. We are also happy to note that the markets for many forest products are stepping up their demands for a transparent supply chain for their products. We are happy to see producer organizations in many of the countries in the region engaging in certification processes and activities enabling legal trade in forest products. It's also great to see some of the new developments in major importing countries like China and Vietnam. Now, the revised forest law of 2019 in China, that includes a ban on illegal forest products, and commitments from businesses on entrenching legality in their supply chains are increasing. That's also an encouraging sign. Now, referring to Glasgow, as Mario did already, we welcome, of course, the US-China agreement launched in Glasgow, where the two sides, and I now refer to the title of that agreement, the two sides intend to engage collaboratively in support of eliminating global illegal deforestation through effectively enforcing their respective laws on banning illegal imports. Quite a result from that meeting, among many other encouraging developments. So we are keen to learn then on how this program, with all the stakeholders involved, can contribute to these high-level commitments by helping Chinese importers remove deforestation from their supply chains. Quite a big undertaking, but the lower Mekong region is our key contributors and participants for making that happen. So along the same path, it is encouraging for us to see the agreement entered into between Vietnam and the US on legality in timber trade, which builds, of course, on the achievements in forest governance and timber legality assurance systems of the FLECT VPA between Vietnam and the EU. That is the sort of building progress on past progress, which we would like to see in the region, and which is very much happening. We think these developments will help strengthen the focus on legality in the supply chains in the lower Mekong region and beyond. And as noted already, this program is key to that effort. In spite of these good news, though, we are concerned that illegality persists in forest products trade in the region, and that some markets still do not require documented compliance with laws and regulations. We see the Lower Mekong program as an important element in a multifaceted effort to make legal trade easier and illegal trade less attractive. Accordingly, we encourage transparency in forest trade. As such, we wonder how it is possible that trade statistics reported by one importing country in the Lower Mekong region do not match the corresponding statistics from the exporting country. Quite a conundrum. What this does suggest is perhaps that illicit or extra legal trade does continue to take place. While we're on that subject, let me refer quickly to the high-resolution satellite imagery that Norway is making available, which which are open to use by governments, civil society, technical agencies in the region. We encourage you to make use of these. FAO and the UN RED program are key assistance which you can refer to make use of these high-resolution satellite imagery, which should be useful to monitor deforestation following from trade flows in the region and other developments which you may find useful. Let me get back to the subject matter though. Export of logs from natural forests, we understand, are now banned from the lower Mekong countries. Increased focus on plantation and plantation timber is therefore a welcome development, as long as this does not take place at the cost of natural forests and not at the cost of the land tenure of local communities or their access to their customary land. Developing new models of forest industries that can thrive with the engagement of local communities and ensuring legality and sustainability will therefore determine the future of forestry in the region. So, engaging supply chains such as rubber, which is currently outside the remit of this program, but could perhaps be a future focus, maybe an element in your efforts that could be strengthened, especially seeing that rubber is likely to be included at some point in the new UK and EU regulations on import of forest risk commodities into Europe. These are legislations which are about to be launched, and it is especially important to watch what sort of commodities are included and what are the implications for exporting countries as well. These new regulations, of course, are a result of consumers wanting to be able to choose legal and sustainably produced goods, and to keep illegal and unsustainable products out of the market. So with those observations and encouragements, let me wish you a successful regional dialogue. Let me thank you for this opportunity to share some hopes and concerns for our joint effort to rule out forest crime and to promote legal trade in forest products in the lower Mekong region. So thank you very much for allowing me these words, and really wish for a successful webinar today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leif-Jan. Thank you both for setting the scene for this dialogue in a forward-looking and also very real about what challenges lie ahead. Also referring to the Glasgow commitments that were made, also very important for us is context. I'd like to spend the next minute just to walk you through our project. And obviously you can't do this in 1 minute, so let me just tell you who we have in the project. You see all the photos as well as the logos. These are our partners. You will be hearing from many of them. So let me just tell you some of the activities that we are engaging in already that won't be featured in today's dialogue heavily. We are working with CITES on the specific CITES species that are listed and of interest in trade in the lower Mekong, specifically processes called the non-detriment findings on rosewood for Lao, as well as legal acquisition findings for all countries. We're trying to make systems for that. We're engaging with RECOFT in training and capacity building, specifically related to smallholders and a host of the related stakeholders thereof. We will be talking about certification, which is largely led by our partner Pfc, but we'll be talking more about the mechanism. So let me just say there's been a lot of progress already in all 5 countries, well, minus Myanmar, let's say all 4 countries, in terms of establishing what is called quality infrastructure, in ensuring that national certification schemes can be set up and employed. We're also working with ITTO and GGSC, both who will also be part of our dialogue and will feature in our discussions. With that, let's move on to session 1. We have sent you all a link to 2 videos. You might have seen the 3rd video, which came a bit late, with the speakers that you see on the screen now. I hope you've taken a minute to, or actually more than a minute, a couple of minutes per speaker to be connected to these videos that we've sent. But in case not, we're going to show you a synopsis, a very short trailer version, can I call it, of these 3 videos. Over to you, Katrina. Thanks.
I'm Ashley Steele, and I want to share available data to understand production and trade of wood products in the Lower Mekong region. This table provides a snapshot of the current trade from the region. It shows the significant scale of trade in processed wood products from China, Thailand, and Vietnam, and the minimal scale of processed wood product exports from Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. Log exports have plunged over the last few years. Myanmar was the major log exporter from the region in 2013, the peak year when exports surged in anticipation of a log export ban. That ban was announced in October 2012, but was not imposed until April 2014. Looking at the same data from Laos, we observe a similar trend. In this case, exports peaked in 2015, when China's demand was also surging. Concerns about the unsustainable scale of the trade led to a government decree, PMO 15, in May 2016. And this prohibited the export of unprocessed timber from natural forests, and it restricted domestic trade in wood products. Looking at species level data, the trend in import of rosewood logs from the Lower Mekong region is particularly important. These data describe the volume of rosewood logs produced in the region and then exported to China. China's imports of these high-value rosewood logs peaked in 2014, when rosewood logs comprised 62% of the total log imports to China from Lower Mekong countries. The dramatic decrease was driven by shifts in both supply and demand. First, there had been a significant stockpiling of logs following announcements of impending log export restrictions in Myanmar and Laos. Second, China's demand for rosewood was dampened by escalating prices, declining overall consumption, introduction of environmental legislation, shifting trends in furniture fashion, and increasing availability of less costly rosewood lookalike substitute species from Africa. Now looking specifically at teak sawnwood, recently the supply has declined because of log export restrictions and the decline in availability of logs from old growth stands. Plantation teak is now supplying a greater proportion of demand in India and China, although the bulk of this plantation teak is provided by increasing area of plantations in other parts of the world. There's a considerable trade in tropical plywood to destinations outside the region, with Vietnam and China as the major exporters outside of the region. There's also some trade between Cambodia and Thailand to the US. Thank you for your attention.
I'm Mathieu van Rijn. I would like to share a few slides to better understand forest area and forest-related emission development in the Lower Mekong region. The country reports submitted to the UNFCCC, including forest reference levels, forest reference emission levels, and REDD+ technical annexes to biennial update reports, which shows that the forest area in the recent past was still declining, with about 5 million hectares over this 10-year period. Some countries have already shown some improvements in trends. When we look specifically at the data on plantation areas, we can notice an increase in the area of plantations in the Lower Mekong region. On the left side, I show the compiled information from the region following the REDD+ forest definitions used. On the right side, as comparison, I added information from Cambodia and Thailand on rubber plantations. Cambodia and Thailand both consider rubber an agriculture crop. If we look at individual country information, we can see in all countries an increasing area of plantations. If we look at the reported emissions over the same period and removals over the period in negative values, we don't see obvious trends, other than that we still have twice as much emissions as removals. However, if we look at the individual country data, we do see improvements in the results reported by Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, which are the 3 countries that have submitted a technical annex on REDD+ results to the UNFCCC. I hope these reflections can help you in the discussions in the dialogue on sustainable forest trade in the Lower Mekong region.
My name is George Scott. Banks and investors provide finance to every economic sector. Banks also serve as important players in the trade of products produced by forest-based industries. Without bank financing, also forest-based industries could not work their way into the equity and bond markets that allow them to access longer-term and cheaper financing. A review of data of issuances of securities over the past 8 years found that finance has been dominated by China and Japan. When looking at the financing activities of Lower Mekong-based financing institutions, we can see that the finance of domestic companies accounts for nearly 10% of total finance extended. This implies that while the level of involvement in forest-related finance by domestic banks may still be relatively low, it is still material. Banks involved in financing high-risk forest-based industries face legal risks that result from banking regulations and anti-money laundering laws. Due to the prevalence and nature of illegal deforestation, it is very difficult for banks to quantify the level of exposure it has to illegal activities and the potential impact that they may have. Additionally, much illegally sourced timber is used as a primary input, feeding global supply chains of pulp and paper and wood products. This means that even if banks are not involved in extraction, they may well be financing illegal and unsustainable timber processing in downstream value chains. As in 2021, we seem to have reached a crunch point that calls for greater accountability in the global financial sector. In the EU, the European Parliament has called for a new deforestation and due diligence law. In the UK, parliamentarians from across the political spectrum have supported calls for a similar regulation of supply chains to cover financiers. In China, the revision of the laws governing commercial banks is seen as an important and vital chance to institute stronger forest safeguards. The proposed Targeting Environmental and Climate Recklessness Act in the US, a marker bill intended to stimulate debate, would restrict access to the US financial system for environmental culprits in the same way that currently applies to firms accused of cybercrime, human rights abuses, corruption, and wildlife trafficking. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you enjoy the rest of today's program.
I hope you've all enjoyed that. And let me repeat again, there are longer versions, full versions of these presentations in the link that was sent, that was in the chat box. So if you are interested, you found that interesting and you want to have another look or a deeper understanding, please visit those videos in the link. I noticed that there's quite some action in the mural. This is very much welcomed. Please do visit as we go on. We'll go straight to session 2. We won't take any questions at this point. I want to make sure that we are on time, so we'll go straight to session 2. Session 2, as you might recall, is subtitled Hearing It from the Horse's Mouth. So for these horses that we talk about, the first set are from the from the demand side, excuse me. We have 3 speakers. And I'd like to first invite Mr. Zhang Fengwen, who is the Director of R&D from the Beijing New Building Material Group, specifically the Forest Products Company. Over to you, Mr. Zhang.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm Zhang Fengwen from BNBMG. It's my honor to give the presentation. The topic is the status and development of the sustainable timber trade in China. In my presentation, and the part one is the promotion of sustainable timber trade from BMG Forest, and part two is the BMG Forest contribution on the global carbon neutral vision. And the first, and we will tell about us, who we are. We are BMG Forest. It's a three-tier enterprise of CNBM. And for our business, first, the FAO divides forest product into 6 categories and 3 classes: logs, industry logs, sawmill, timber, and wood-based panel, including plywood, paperboard, fiberboard, and OSB, and so on, is our main business. This is the logs first, and you can see war from the worldwide. And wood business logs and wood-based panel is also from worldwide. The categories and the species, the logs, lumber, and wood-based panels. In 2021, the totally volume is close to the 5 million cubic meter. It's the distribution map of the operation bases in China, and the yellow is our headquarters, and now I'm in the headquarters. That's the top view of operation center of the East China of BMG Forest. It's in the east of China. That's the map of shows the sustainable supply chain for forest product, and the operating the certificate forest product, avoid the illegal deforestation, and reasonable use of the forest resources. Wood and wood product have natural carbon fixation effect, promote the consumption concept of the low carbon, promote the development of resources saving and environment friendly society, realize natural sustainable development. About the standard and guideline for sustainable timber procurement. The procurement of the sustainable timber is increasing year by year, promoted the common development of the upstream and downstream supply chain partner. Regardless of the logs, timber, and the wood-based panels, it's necessary to clarify the source of the wood. To ensure the wood comes from the sustainable managed forest, be certificate for sustainable forest with the certification label. The third, working with the various non-governmental organizations in China to eliminate the problem of the forest degradation and deforestation, to promote the importance of the responsible forest management. And fourth, some responsible forest certificate system include FSC, Pfc, CFCC is from China, and SFI from North America. This is the mark for FSC. It's our company. And about the status of LMR regional sourcing for us, as we know, LMR region is indeed rich in forest resources, such as rubber wood. However, consider it's difficult for supplier in the region to provide certification documents related to forest legality. So it's actually difficult to direct cooperate with SMEs supplier in LMR first. We have strong plywood product capacity in China. We need to purchase a large amount of legally produced veneer. There is a large forger and construct mark, which also need a large amount of the sustainable saw timber. So we also hope that this region will strengthen the certificate of forest legality. Is also focus our great attention, equally important on trader and end user. And we work with the China Timber and the Work Product Certification Association. And also, we are the founder member company of GGSC. The part 2, we will show the contribution on the carbon neutral vision. And as we know, our business have 3 functions, including carbon absorption function, carbon reduce function, and carbon storage function, carbon storage use, lifetime carbon sequestration. And also for the challenge and the opportunity for sustainable timber procurement, and we think the green building materials certification is very important in China now. And the 30/60 carbon target set by Chinese government is a very good challenge for us. And 3 is the lower carbon lifestyle widely promoted in China society. And this picture shows our sustainable timber supply chain, and by the China Euro Railway Express. And also, we have some public construction. You can see it's the largest single timber structure in Asia. It's Tianfu International Conference Center project in Sichuan Province, Chengdu City. And it's a very typical sustainable glulam structure. And you can see this is in the building. And also our operation center of Laws of China, the building is also the wood frame structure, and it is a sustainable building. And the third, we do think the sustainable market is very important, and we show the people our slogan, wood building the future. For us, we are Fortune 500 member company, and the sustainable timber industry operator, and we as the health and the environmental guardians. For the end, and we in conclusion, responsible to climate change is a brand new goal concentrated at the global level. The world country and the enterprise will have to meet the future social lasting huge changes. Second, we contribute Chinese 2030 carbon peak goal and the 2060 carbon neutral vision to the world. and we also contributed to building a community with a shared future for man-made. The third, the 36 carbon goal will also bring a real development opportunity for companies with the tributors of the low carbon and negativity carbon forest industry. And the fourth, we need to stride across countries and the region, transcend the boundaries and enterprise and organize, connect the participant of the entire industry chain to work together to achieve green and sustainable development. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. But next, I'd like to go to two more speakers. And these two speakers are going to present together. And again, we are in the session that's talking about the demand side. In Mr. Zhang's case, the demand side was quite evident. I understand that BNBM and the Forest Products Company is one of the biggest leading companies in China in terms of importing of sawn timber and OSB. So that's clearly a demand company. In the next two speakers, Anders Norendheim from WWF Singapore and Ryan Bjorkquist from Standard Chartered Bank, they'll be talking about the financing sector, who finances and lends to companies throughout the supply chain and how they impact the demand of sustainable or unsustainable, legal or not so legal timber. Over to Anders.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm here to talk about a little bit of the finance sector, call it momentum on sustainable forest finance. It was reflected in the beginning that there's tremendous international momentum around forests, the value of forests, the importance of biodiversity, and that is certainly true. This is also true in the international finance sector. What we're perhaps seeing less of is the same momentum in the lower Mekong countries, where things are generally moving quite slowly, or in some cases, not at all. Looking at the international perspective, so there's a number of international frameworks, principles, and initiatives that address sustainable finance that financial institutions sign up to and collaboratively work to improve the sustainable finance operations in their lending, investment, and insurance. One of the most prominent one on the banking side is UNEP Finance Initiative's Principles for Responsible Banking, where you have, at this point, most of the major banks in the world signed up to working towards implementing these principles across their lending activities. On the biodiversity, forest ecosystem type issues, we also have specific initiatives related to those. You may have heard about the task force for climate-related financial disclosure that was released a couple of years ago. Now we also have the task force on nature-related financial disclosure, which is becoming an increasingly important construct for financial institutions to sign up to and to work together to understand how nature-related issues, including things like sustainable forests management, affect their financing, both on the risk side and on the opportunity side. We also have important pledges that are coming through. So, for example, the Finance for Biodiversity Pledge, where a number of financial institutions have pledged to improve how they incorporate biodiversity into their financing. While some regional financial institutions do participate in this, there's a couple of banks that are part of the Principles for Responsible Banking. There's a few banks in Asia that are part of the TNFD. it's not something that has really been picked up too much in the lower Mekong banks. What we're also seeing globally is quite some considerable momentum on the regulatory side. So this is a map of where we see sustainable type regulations being implemented in globally based on the WWF assessment. And we've really seen a tremendous momentum just in a few years, last few years, on sustainable finance regulations, including in this region. But for the most part, these regulations are still focused on climate issues where they exist. The nature, biodiversity related issues are still not really factored in too much, apart from in a few of the European countries. In ASEAN, there was the ASEAN political group just released a framework for a sustainable finance taxonomy, so a classification of financial instruments for the ASEAN region. And in Singapore, we're working on implementing that to see what exactly does sustainability mean in different sectors. But it still takes primarily a climate lens, whereas nature and biodiversity issues are viewed from primarily a safeguards point of view. What we are seeing regionally, though, is quite a lot of industry-led guidelines and principles. So in most of the ASEAN countries, most of the lower Mekong countries, we do have high-level principles launched primarily by banking associations, industry associations, defining what financial institutions need to do in the areas of sustainability. Again, not all of these look specifically at forests, but some of them are starting to look at high-risk sectors, and in some cases, forestry-related sectors might be part of those. If we look a little bit more deeper at individual banks in the lower Mekong countries, this is from the WWF Singapore's annual sustainable banking assessment. And we cover here Thailand and Vietnam, but we've added also assessments for Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. Now, Thailand is clearly the most advanced here in adopting or acknowledging the importance of sustainable forest management or deforestation issues in their lending activities. We're also seeing a little bit of momentum here in Vietnam, but in Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, we're not really seeing any public momentum from the banks as of yet. So there's quite a little bit of work that needs to be done in those markets. If we look at one fairly advanced bank in the region, K-Bank in Thailand, you can see some of the elements that they look at when they consider lending activities. They explicitly acknowledge the importance of climate and ecosystem issues in affecting their lending operations. They do have specific elements to the specific screens that would lead to rejection of loan applicants if they don't follow certain sustainability standards. And especially for forestry, they have support for Fsc certification, and there are certain activities like slash and burn farming practices they will not finance. So this is sort of an example of, I think, what is good practice in the region and could potentially be mirrored by other financial institutions across the lower Mekong. But there are significant challenges still in working with the financial institutions to really get them up to the level of the international banks that where we want to see them. Internal barriers are things like lack of a buy-in for the business case for deforestation risks. We have a lot easier conversations on climate than we do on deforestation. And that's just a factor of bringing this to the attention of the business managers. There's often some understanding among the environmental or lending teams of the banks of the importance of deforestation issues, but unless you have that top level commitment, it's really difficult to get buy-in across the bank to address those. And there's very much lack of internal capacity and knowledge around these areas. For external barriers, we see a continued lack of industry or regulatory policies to address deforestation in financial legislation, where some markets have sustainable finance type encouragement in different sectors. We also see that there's usually not an incentive structure built into that would encourage the financial institutions to move quicker into these areas. And quite often there's no client demand for sustainable finance. So these challenges that you have in national banks create a market fragmentation where the international banks are a lot further ahead, the ones that operate in this region. And it essentially comes to a position where you're competing in under different set of rules. And that's really difficult for the market to develop. So with the finance platform that we are developing, we are hoping to address some of these issues and really to level the playing fields for international banks who are really taking the commitment to improve sustainable forest finance and really also get the local banks on board in order to offer these exciting products to their clients. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. And I hand over to Ryan, who's going to talk a little bit about how things are done at Standard Charter. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me today. Once again, my name is Ryan Bjorkquist. I'm a Director of Environmental and Social Risk at Standard Chartered Bank, based here in Singapore. For the next few minutes, we're going to talk about a bank's role in sustainable and unsustainable timber in the region. And I'd like to kick off and kind of identify two categories where we do kind of identify those risks. The first is the external category. So what are the risks to communities and society where we do business? And the second category is what are the risks internally to a bank, which we're exposed to from our clients and the industries that we do business in. So as we've already heard today, I think the external risks are very well known. You know, the strong supply and demand pressure can lead to illegal activities. Those can be illegal logging and forest degradation. We do have issues around forced labor and modern slavery in certain areas, land tenure, access rights, biodiversity, and so on. And those risks are very real. And we do try to manage those as best as we can through various tools. One of those is our position statements, which I'll get into in a minute. And those are the kind of ways we go about it. What are the risks to a financial institution? Well, by financing our clients, we are exposing ourselves to risk, whether that's illegal logging in areas with high conservation value, clients operating in markets which are defined as high risk, community impacts, whether that's legal liability or the impacts of the actual physical business activity. And then something interestingly enough that we just heard about, which we do also consider very carefully, is do we have the right financial incentives in place to incentivize the positive outcomes with our clients, right? So let's make sure that we have the right incentives in place to have responsibly managed forests. We're not incentivizing illegal activities, whether that's through financial incentives or something else. And let's make sure that we are incentivizing the activities we would like to see to promote sustainable forestry going forward. How do we mitigate these risks? So, there's several issues at hand, a few of those which we already talked about. We leverage external frameworks, both domestically and internationally, to help achieve that. That could be the Equator Principles for project-related finance, the UN Global Compact, Natural Capital Finance Alliance, to name a few. And then we also encourage our clients on key sustainability issues. And so that's kind of the bilateral conversations that we have on a daily basis. That could be around deforestation-free supply chains. And we would like to see that cascaded up and down the supply chain. So not only for the producers, but also the end user as well. We are working towards more transparency within the supply chains. And that's something we ask of our clients. And then also an expected demonstration of legal and certified sourcing. So we do want to know where the product is coming from. That is something that is really important to our process. So how do we do this on a daily basis? We do it through our position statements. So we do have a position statement on forestry, and we have a few standards around that. So for example, we will not finance clients who develop new timber plantations by converting or degrading high conservation value or high carbon stock forests. We will not finance clients who use fire for forestry or plantation operations, whether that's clearance or land prep or planting. And then also, illegal logging and trading activities. So these are pretty strong restrictions that we stand behind. And then furthermore, when we get to the incentive structure conversation, what do we want to see and what do we want to encourage in our clients? We expect to have a certification, an appropriate chain of custody scheme, whether that's FSC or PFC. We expect to have a demonstration of that legal origin, as I mentioned earlier. And then we also apply CITES as well for endangered species. So that's kind of the foundation of how we approach it from a policy and position perspective. We do have a few other standards. I think the other one I'd like to highlight is a responsible sourcing policy. So as of last year, we've implemented a requirement that we expect to see a responsible sourcing policy for all of our clients. And that could be around sourcing of wood, paper, and then no deforestation, exploitation, NDPE. Et cetera. So how do we actually manage this on a daily basis? So we go through a 2-year review process on our position statements. We are constantly and proactively managing our portfolio. So we actually take a stoplight approach to review our forestry portfolio on a quarterly basis. So we try to benchmark as best as we can. What are our clients doing? How are they operating? And what is that kind of level of client engagement that we have with them? So you can see on the right side of the screen, these are our last 2 reviews from 2018 and 2019. And you can see a positive trend where we've moved more into that green section. So what this means is that we, based on our benchmarking practice, our portfolio is kind of moving in that positive direction. So all of those requirements that I just went through a slide or 2 ago, we are seeing a positive trajectory towards more compliance, within our portfolio. And we do this, as I said, we do this quarterly and annually. And at the end of the day, we will decline transactions and we will exit clients if they are not in line with our expectations, with our standards, or if they're not showing a willingness or desire to make those changes that we expect of them. So we really do take a proactive approach here to make sure that we are applying our standards, and we do expect that of our clients on a regular basis. So as I said, how do we manage this risk? And it really is through client engagement. We do have our policies. We expect that our clients will demonstrate that legal and certified sourcing requirement. We expect them to follow an appropriate chain of custody scheme for their product. It's something that we really do value very highly. And then lastly, we also have our cross-sector requirements. So one of those is around human rights. Expectations around forced labor, modern slavery, and the requirements around that, land use change and degradation, and then lastly, climate change. So those are kind of those last three lenses that we apply, and that's true across the board, not just for forestry. Those are requirements that we expect from all of our clients. So in conclusion, there are risks, they're very real, and we try our best through client engagement and strong policies to manage those risks. So with that, I'm going to pause and turn it back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, all speakers that represented the supply side.
Yeah, so we have selected one question for each of the presenters. So let me start with Mr. Zhang. Yeah, it's basically a combination, summary of a few questions. So does your company check the legality of the timber, or do you have a due diligence system for all timber coming from the lower Mekong region countries? And if so, is this an internal initiative, or is this part of a broader effort in China? Okay. Well, let's go back to this question later on. So let's move on to Anders then. So Anders, thank you for the presentation. Again, we try to combine a few questions for you. So here it is. Do you think the lower Mekong banks are willing to engage on forest sustainability issues? And how can we incentivize greater alignment between the global responsible banking standards and the current lending practices in the region?
I think it depends quite a lot on the market, because we've been engaging with the banks in this region for a number of years, and started off with climate, which initially was a slow discussion, but now really has gained momentum, and that's when we can start to bring in other things like ecosystems, nature-related issues, and forests. So but in order to really show that, it becomes a risk question. So to what extent is this a risk to the financial institution? And a lot of the momentum that we've seen in international markets is based on reputational and market risks. So there's a strong and increasingly legal risks also, as George pointed out in his presentation. So those are elements that we're not really seeing that much in the markets in the lower Mekong countries. So it becomes a little bit of a greater challenge in certain markets. But I do also think that the physical risk element is quite critical in these areas. And we do have conversations around ecosystem risks that lead to unsustainable outcomes by businesses. And because of this, it then affects the financial institutions and their perception of risk. So I think it is possible. We just need to build the right business case for them. And this is why it's critical, I think, to show how international banks are doing it, how global frameworks can be applied, and also that it's not as difficult or value destroying as sometimes the perception is among financial institutions. It doesn't mean that you're going to lose all of your business overnight. It means that you're actually going to be able to conduct business in a better way. And this is really where we need to get the narrative with the local financial institutions.
Thank you, Anders. So let's move on to Ryan. Ryan, thank you for the presentation. A few questions combined into one again. So how do you monitor your clients' operations for potential breaches of your policies? That's the first part of the question. And then what kind of evidence do you ask actually from the clients? to show compliance with your environmental criteria? And finally, have you had to refuse clients because of unsustainable practices?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I'll kind of approach it in three ways. So how do we ensure compliance, or how do we check compliance? We have an annual review process that is extended to all of our clients that we extend credit to. So if we bank a company, there's an annual assessment that needs to be done as part of that approval process. And that allows us to assess a company's performance against our position statements. So if we take one example saying, do you have a appropriate chain of custody scheme? That's a question that's asked and answered every year. And so based on the results of that answer, that's how we either take additional action or ensure compliance. The evidence question it's very actually closely related to the first one. So we do ask for documentation, whether that's either a certificate or an assurance in the case of FSC or something like that. But we do ask for documentary evidence to support all of those responses. And we do that annually as well. And then lastly, if we do have a client who is not in alignment with our expectations, we will take action, and we have previously. So, there may be a situation where a client is not willing or interested to meet one of those standards, and if that is the case, then we will put in a plan to exit that relationship if that's the need.
Thanks. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, Anders, again. Just last check with Mr. Zhang. Mr. Zhang, are you there? And if yes, can you hear me?
Thank you for your question. And at present, we don't import Mekong River timber. If we import, we will check their legitimacy certificate. We will do diligence.
Can you provide more details on the process for checking the legitimacy of the timber coming from the region?
At present, we don't import Mekong River timber. Yes.
All right.
Yes, and because we need the certification, of the agency.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhang, Anders, Ryan, for the very quick Q&A. I think with that we can close the first part of session 2 on the demand side and move on to the supply side. Over to you. Back to you, Akiko.
Okay, everybody, I hope let us resume on session 2, part 2. Again, we are still hearing it from the horse's mouth. And this next part of session 2, we'll hear from the supply side. We have 2 speakers and representing quite different perspectives. First is Peter Vogte, and he is the CEO of Sylvie Carbon. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Akiko. So I'm going to talk about supply of sustainable grown timber, and I'm going to focus totally on Laos and totally on the plantation sectors. I'm not talking about natural wood at all today. First of all, Sylvie Carbon Agroforestry is what was previously Stora Enso Lao Company Limited. We have been doing agroforestry in Laos since 2007. And we are presently working on about 3,500 hectares of eucalyptus plantations, some acacia, and most of it on state concession land. We have a well-established and appreciated agroforestry model that photo there, it's actually eucalyptus plantation, even if what most of what you see is rice. We are FSC certified since 2017, and we sell veneer logs and pulpwood. And we are also now positioning the company for sale of carbon credits in new ventures that we are getting into. So what is sustainably produced wood? Well, to me at least, it's we and in the company we talk about the triple bottom line. First of all, we have to have a profit. And it goes without saying, if there is not a profit in the operations, there is no sustainability whatsoever. Then, of course, we have to make that profit while considering the social aspects and the environmental aspects. Now, who wants the wood to be sustainably produced? Well, first of all, it's the consumers, the markets. Market demand is there and it's hopefully increasing. Then, of course, the communities who are affected with the with plantation schemes. Investors, quite a few investors, and more so, are aware of having green portfolios and making sure that they are sustainable, not only in forestry. And then the government should be interested in having sustainably managed resources. And then, of course, there are also other stakeholders. So, well, what are the challenges in Laos? Well, as a lack of a market demand, we've heard from China that there's a big demand of certified wood. Well, in Laos, there is not. Come back to that. There is no, after all these years, there are still no best practice or guideline for sustainable forest management issued by the government. There is no national forest certification system, neither for chain of custody nor for sustainable forest management. And there is no access for smallholders to a certification system that is suitable and manageable for them. All this creates what I call an unlevel playing field. Looking at the demand of sustainably produced wood or certified wood, if you put it simply, if looking at Silver Carbon's market, our own market, only 11% of the wood we sell today goes to buyers that are actually requiring certified wood. And we are, as I said, FSC certified fully since 2017. 90% of the buyers don't care whether it's certified or not. You look at the market in itself, the whole market in Laos, then it's actually a bit better because there are a couple of mills coming online or already online that require certified woods. We're increasing now from 11 to 16% of the demand in Laos. There is actually a demand for certified wood. If you compare that to the world market, it's a huge difference. Again, in the world market, it's only 95% of the wood, and I'm talking about pulp, paper industry, is actually, there is a demand for a chain of custody certified wood. Well, I said we have no best practice or guidelines in Laos, but like a jack in the box in June 2021, there suddenly appeared a case study for Chinese investors. This is produced by NGOs in cooperation with the Lao National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's an absolutely fantastic publication. It covers all principles except what I talked about, market and profitability, but that's fine. It's easy to read and understand, good illustrations, and it's produced in 3 languages, English, Lao, and Chinese. This is really, and Akiko, we have to work more on this one. But it's not a case study. And it should apply to all investors, regardless of nationality. And it isn't ratified by the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, and does therefore not exist. So it's basically has no legal standing. It's also, just as a parenthesis, it's amazing that in Laos you have to make a special guide for Chinese investors. To me, that shouldn't be needed because they should follow the same guidelines as every other investor. Laos smallholders, and we have a situation in Laos where the plantation sector is growing quickly. We have pulp industry already. We have a couple of large-scale veneer and plywood industries coming online. And when the farmers see that there is a market, they will plant trees. They will do it with or without intervention from government or aid donors, development partners. And it's growing in Laos, but you can see the importance of it in the supply chain in Thailand and Vietnam already. Vietnam is basically, it's all smallholders. It's fantastic what has happened there. But the smallholders cannot afford, nor can they understand FSC certification. It's not suitable for smallholders. And if there is no other system available, it means that the smallholders, they risk to be excluded or have to accept reduced prices on a market with a growing demand for certified wood. And as I talked again about the unlevel playing field. If you have, if the playing field is not leveled and not everyone has to produce sustainable wood, then there is an unbalance, because to produce, let's face it, produce wood sustainably, to go through the FSC or PFC certification, it costs money, and money which is not paid additionally for yet by the buyers. Now, to make that more even, we can do a couple of different things. Personally, I believe that the best pressure that the producer can have for being sustainable is the market and the consumers. If I can't sell, I have to change. If certification or sustainable wood is a requirement for me to be able to sell, I will change. That's definitely, to me, the most important. Demand from the demand from the consumers, demand from the financiers goes there as well. Issuing official best practice and guidelines for sustainable forest management in Laos. I think that's very important because it doesn't exist today, but we have a good opportunity right now to make sure there is. Then in Laos, again, we have to have a national forest certification system that is suitable for all actors, including the smallholders. And then what we also need in Laos is a consistent and nationwide application of existing laws and regulations, because we have a lot of them, but all of us who work in Laos, that we know that one province has one interpretation and another district or another province has another one. So there's a bit to do there as well. The carrot and the stick for producing sustainable wood. Standards and regulations are needed, but again, market demand weighs is much heavier and much more important than standards and regulations. But they should work in combination. So we need the best practices, we need the certification system and instructions from the government, and we need an increased demand from the market. And we talked about it, and we all know this, of course, how to certify sustainability. Well, it has to be based on legislation. And in Laos, we have it already. The new forest law clearly refers to international certification or accepted standards for the certification of forest. And the Ministry of Industry and Commerce has just issued a decision that sort of confirms and regulates chain of custody for all wood, domestic as well as export. Then introduction again of the National Forest Certification System, and important certification, even if monitored, even if sustainability is monitored by the government, it has to be certified by a third independent party. And this is just the way we could make it work in Laos, and what the roles the government should have: set standards and regulations, guidelines, national forest certification standards, monitor the operations, also government. But then when it comes to certifying sustainability, it's done by third party entities. This is where we want to come. We want to have a level playing field where all the actors in the Lao plantation sector has to follow the same rules and legislation, and work towards a nation of sustainably managed forest plantations. Thank you.
Very well said. And we go to the next speaker, who is Nga, and she is with PFC. She's going to be telling us about the smallholder perspective, contrasting what Peter has told us from an industry perspective. Over to Nga, please.
Great, thank you. So, hello everyone, and my name is Nga. It's a great honor for me today to, on behalf of smallholder in Vietnam, talking about the case study of how Vietnamese farmers moving toward sustainable supply chain. So before start, let's have a look at who they are. So in Vietnam, there are more than 1.5 million farmers who highly depended on the forestry for their livelihood. On average, they own less than 2 hectares. And they plan to major planting species, including acacia and eucalyptus. Majority apply the short rotation. It means that plantation would not last more than 7 years. At the income level, on average, a smallholder could earn about $2,000 US per hectare for a rotation of 5 years. And for many, this plantation is considered as a living account bank, kind of like bank living account, because they're gonna use that as a resort for their housing repair or for their children education. Now let's look on the right. That is a typical practice of plantation cycle in Vietnam. And obviously that poses a lot of environmental and social issues. It's not about that Vietnamese farmers don't want to apply the sustainable practice. However, they also face certain challenge. So changing to sustainable practice is challenge, but obviously that emerged. And sustainable forest management group certification is considered as one solution. So now I'm going to talk about the Vietnam Forest Certification System. I'm very happy to see few international certification has mentioned during today's section, but not many talking about the national system. And here is one example. So VFCS Vietnam started working toward the PFC system since 2015, and it became the PFC member in 2019. The system was officially endorsed in 2020. It means the VFCS is a nationally owned but internationally recognized system, and Vietnamese want to make the VFCS an inclusive and meaningful framework that works for smallholder, because that appreciate the local context of smallholder plantation and farmer organization. And the VFCS have a standard on the group certification, and they already started to test few model of the group certification, because depend on the institutional and governance system. in different locations, the model could be different. And today I'm gonna talk about one of those, and that is the Huế or Quang Tri Group FM certification. So let's start. The group were first established since 2016, thanks to the support from a Finnish organization named Agricot. The purpose of that project is they try to support the farmer organization to able to provide the forest certification services apart from other services that they provide for the farmers. And the project is first certified in 2020 with 6 cooperatives in Thừa Thiên Huế province. And in July 2021, they also expand the scope of the group and cover other cooperatives in Quang Tri province. And now the group is including more than 200 smallholders and cover 1,300 hectares. You can see on the top there Đông Hà Green Energy, that is private sector, and they do have some involvement in supporting this company. So Đông Hà Green Energy, they have a crucial role in supporting this group certification in terms of maintaining and scaling in the future. Let's talk about the motivation behind why they want to support this group. This is because the company want to sell their product, whether it is wood pellet or panel or sawn timber, to the international market, and they recognize that in order to do so, the material should be certified, and they support the group in order to achieve that that purpose. But another benefit, actually, the Đông Hà Green Energy also benefit by doing so. They do get support from the government in terms of, for example, like factory construction, or they get a lower interest from the bank because they are successfully demonstrate that the company is committed to sustainable forest management of the province and of the country. So since 2021, they started sign the MOU with the Huế Cooperative Alliance, and they do have a certain responsibility. So for example, like providing financial support to maintain the certificate. What does that mean? That is the company support, they pay the audit cost for the group. And they also collaborate with other sector actor in order to help the group to do more training and open the scope of the group certification to cover other area as well. Other obligation, you can have a look here, also including have a contract to buy all the certified material and provide the farmer good quality seedling for them to replanting after harvesting. So what is the motivation for smallholder why they want to apply the VFCS PFC FM certification? For Vietnamese farmer, economic incentive is still play very important role. Under this group certification, farmer understand that the market of their certified product gonna be much better with a better condition. For example, like the buyer that don't have green energy, they committed to pay 5% higher the market price at the purchasing time for the certified material with a longer buying contract, and even they can buy the certified material from the plantation that unfortunately damaged by natural disaster or fire. Apart from that, they also receive other support, for example, like the public funding, like Agricot, or under UN RED program. Those funding are really important for them in order to expand the group into a larger area. And there are many training in terms of the best silviculture practice in order to improve the plantation productivity as well as the quality. They get support to in terms of material to build their own nursery facility, and also the safety equipment. Those things are important in the way that to meet the standard requirement, but also for the well-being the smallholder itself. That said, the process of getting certification is not a rosy process, and the farmer do face many challenges. So the first is about the complex of the standard requirement, coupled with the lack of awareness and capacity of smallholder in sustainable forest management. Let me take one example for that. That is, farmers don't know how to complete the environmental and social assessment report. They don't know how to do the digital map or other practices that, for example, like low impact harvesting, or how to prepare soil in the way that like have less impact to environment. Is something that takes time for them to understand and slowly adopt. Farmer organizations like cooperative, they are excellent in agricultural services, but they do lack the expertise in forestry, and it's gonna and especially in forest certification that is all new to them. Certification come with a code, and finally the buy-in of private sector, for example, like Dongha Green Energy is still an example, but it's not a norm. So all of that makes the certification for smallholder need more support from everyone. So under the Sustainable Forestry, UNRED, under the Pfc, one of the service provider, and in that component they have support by training the smallholder. So there were 5 cooperative with 1,000 hectares has been trained, and they are ready to be included in the scope of the WHE certificate in the next year audit. Pfc also provide the market linkage for Dongha Green Energy by connecting them with the international buyer, and that market demand is very important for Dongha Energy to do the invest into the smallholder group, so that more area and more certified material gonna be available. Training and develop several guidelines for audit on the group certification, audit techniques, so that when the audit when the auditor do the audit, they should not require the evidence that is out of reach of smallholder. So now there are another mechanism that I would like to speak is the Pfc Control Source as a stepwise approach to the full forest certification. And I'm glad that there are questions from Mr. Zhang before about the due diligence system. So what is the Pfc Control Source? That is one type of Pfc product claim. It refers to the product that made from non-Pfc certified input. So for example, like wood come from wood do not come from the Pfc certified forest, that have gone through a due diligence system and have done the assessment to exclude the controversial source. So what are the controversial sources? In Pfc definition, they cover both legality and sustainability. For example, that if the forest and tree-based material source that come from activity that do not comply with the local, national, and international legislation, activity violate to the human right, conflict timber, forest conversion, unless the certified situation, all the activity do not respect the ecological importance for that area. So the outcome of that PFC due diligence system gonna the Pfc Control Source, and it can be used as it is, or it can mix with the Pfc certified material that it depends on the need of the company. So how does that work in the practice? Currently, Pfc is collaborating with the Chinese wood chip company. They buy wood chip not only for the paper product, but also for the textile. And the project plans to apply and support 11 chip mills in central Vietnam in order to apply due diligence system for 15,000 hectares. So what the chip mill actually going to do, the first is they're gonna get the Pfc chain of custody certified. Then they set up the robust Pfc diligence system and implement that for the whole sourcing region. So what they're gonna to do, they're gonna gathering information, doing risk assessment, risk management, and handling the substantiate concern, as well as no place in the market in case that they recognize there's certain part of the material come from controversial source, for example. And important to stress here is that the smallholder or their sub-supplier don't need to be the Pfc chain of custody certified. So talk quickly about the advantages. It is obviously Pfc Control Source have less strong in terms of sustainability claim compared to the Pfc certified. However, for the certain situation, especially in the smallholder context in high-risk country, the Pfc Control Source have its own value. So the first is peace in mind of yourself and the customer that the risk of the raw material supply contain illegal or controversial source eliminate or reduce. And the second is where is the case that lack of certified material or the system is not ready, the Pfc Control Source can fill the gap immediately. And importantly, this mechanism move the burden of compliance to the sustainability to downstream actor. So instead of forest owner have to do all the work in order to get the certified material, now the compliance responsibility is at hand of the buyer. And lastly, for the Pfc regulation and standard, a single chain of custody standard is applied for selling both the Pfc certified and Pfc Control Source. That means you can start the Pfc chain of custody and the due diligence system for the material that is not certified. And then in order to sell the Pfc Control Source. And once you have the certified materials, you just simply expand the scope of the organization chain of custody in order to cover the certified product as well. So what that how does that imply to the smallholder benefit? It is clear that the time and the resource for the compliance gonna reduce significantly. Farmer also have a better market access because nowadays many more companies require for the legal at least in terms of the supply. And that is also the first step prepared for the farmer. And later when they have more resource, they can step into the group certification to be full certified. What farmer need to do, it's simple. They just need to get the document of their plantation ready and submit to the buyer when they do the due diligence system. So that is my presentation, and thank you very much for the attention. And I'm sorry if it over time a little bit. So if any question, please let me know.
Thank you, Nga. We heard you well. Over to Alexi.
Thank you indeed, Na and Peter, for the interesting perspective from the supply side. So we'll do the same exercise, very short Q&A, one question each, based on the feedback we receive on the mural. And we received quite a few feedbacks on the mural, actually, many questions. Again, thank you to the participants for your active participation. So let's start with Peter. So Peter, if certification does not provide price premium, so question is, why are you pursuing certification? And how would you convince smallholders to participate in certified supply chain?
Well, that's an excellent question. Why do we do that? Well, in our case, we are Scandinavian investors, and I think we have sort of a built-in chip from the day we were born that things should be sustainable. It's a kind of responsibility, but also I can see one advantage which is difficult to put money on, but which actually is the bottom. We talk about the triple bottom line. By having responsible or certified responsible plantations, we also avoid a lot of problems with farmers and with the local people. We get them with us because they appreciate what we do and they actually also profit from it. So that can, of course, I mean, you can the opposite would be, for instance, you have farmers that are not happy with you and they burn down your plantations, and that costs you money. So there are different ways to see on it. But also, I said investors, our investors definitely require us to have a certification, either PFC or FSC, whether we get a premium for the wood or not. We just have to have it.
Thanks, Peter. And about convincing smallholders to participate. So what for you would be maybe the one intervention that can convince smallholders?
Well, to me, all these things should be demand driven. In the end, it has to be demand driven. So if I can see an advantage with being able to supply a higher volume to a customer by also selling smallholders wood and doing that and getting a premium, whether it is for being certified or because I'm supplying a higher volume, then I can also support them in getting their certification one way or the other.
Thanks, Peter. So let's follow up with Na, now still on the smallholder perspective. So Na, with your experience, what are the biggest challenges that smallholders face in transitioning to sustainable forest practices in the lower Mekong region? Do you have any good examples or lessons learned from the 5 countries to overcome and introduce forest certification nationally and successfully?
I think the more challenge, well, there are so many challenges that I don't know how to name it at the most. Because in the end, that is a combination of different sector, but I would say here, I think one is, so that could be the cost, and then the second is also the standard. How to make the standard reflect the smallholder condition. So I think the successful model is so in Vietnam, that is the group certification with the national certification system, and I would say the same for the other country like Thailand. It is also one members under the project, and they also successfully apply the Thai national standard for that rubber plantation. So I would say that is one of the direction that I think could be good for smallholder, and we should support more. In the future?
Thank you, Na. Well, I'm sure your response and Peter's response will raise more questions. And that's great. And that's the purpose of the next session. And we will see you again soon, Peter and Na, in the session 3. So I hand it back to Akiko for introducing that.
Okay, thanks. Great 2 sessions. I really enjoyed all of the insights. The next session, still part of session 2, hearing it from the horse's mouth, we are having a panel discussion. Okay, so this is our panel. We have 5 people. Hopefully we have 5. David Gans may not be able to join us. I couldn't check if you are still with us, David. We have 5 perspectives, 5 people represented by different, 5 people representing 5 perspectives. You've just heard from Na, Pfc. She will represent the smallholder perspective. You heard earlier from Ryan. He's going to represent the financier perspective. Peter, who you just heard from, the industry perspective. David Gans from Recoft will represent the partner perspective. If he's there, he needs to run to for getting his children, picking up his children. And finally, Mr. Boon Suti from the Royal Forestry Department of Thailand, representing the government perspective. Okay, before we open up to everybody, I want to first ask 2 people, David and Mr. Boon Suti, who haven't had presentations yet, to just take 2 minutes to answer one question. Can you please introduce yourself and your priority agenda for promoting legal and sustainable forest supply chains? Please answer from your perspective. I don't know if David is still with us, so I'll give the floor first to Mr. Boon Suti.
Thank you, Akiko. And good afternoon, everyone here and in the online room. And I'm Boon Suti. I work for the lawyer for the department for promoting about the legal and sustainable forest supply chain. I think government sector could develop the policy to contribute the sustainable forest management and capacity building and promoting about the legal trade. It is incentivizing the reforestation and expansion green area in the private land. This is the not engage the big plantation, but also we including 1 tree or 2 tree or 3 tree that planted beside the house for the smallholder. At Thailand, last year we launched this 70 years strategy, national strategy. The strategy is the eco-friendly development and growth. This one strategy is contrary the direct forest expansion, biodiversity administration, sustainable consumption and production. This is can help the legal and the sustainable supply chain by the government sector. That is for the government sector of Thailand. So the Royal Forest Department have developed the program about the subsidy as the high quality seedling for the farmer to plant it, and some subsidy a small budget for the people to plant it in their own land. This is for the support about the legal source for the timber and supply chain for the big company or the sawmill. For this government sector also like this. Thank you, Akiko.
Thank you, Mr. Boon Suti. Okay, so we're going to go to the rest of the panel. And okay, this is your question. We'd like you to please select one other stakeholder group represented in the panel other than your own, and request them for action in a priority area that they play a crucial role in removing barriers for legal and sustainable supply chains. All 4 of you have 2 minutes each. Please select one other stakeholder group, and direct your request. This is your moment. You can ask that stakeholder group what you think is a priority area that they play a crucial role in order to remove barriers for legal and sustainable supply chains. Okay, I think we will begin with any volunteers, but I can't see anybody on the screen right now. So how about we begin with
I can go if you
Peter.
want. Yeah.
Are you ready, Peter? Yep.
Yeah, I'm ready. I have a question for Rian Björkqvist, and it's we talked about demand driven and demand from the market, but also demand from the finances. If we can't sell, we do have no business, and if we can't borrow money, we don't have any business also, at least sometimes. Now so I would like to ask you, Ryan, what we talked about IFC, we talked about PFC. Now the first of all, how do you look upon the IFC performance standards? Is that sort of a banking standard that you're using as well?
Peter, I'm gonna go through all the questions before I ask anybody to reply. So
Okay.
Is that your only request, or do
Yes.
you continue?
That's it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then next, let's ask Ryan. What's your request to any of the other 3 stakeholder groups?
Sure, thank you. So during my presentation, I talked about ensuring we have the right incentives in place to promote the actions and activities that we would like to see. So I guess my question is for Na. Do we as international banks need to do more to support smallholders? And are we incentivizing the right activities through our policies, or is there still more that we need to do? So that's my question for now.
Excellent question. Okay, over to Nga. You aren't answering. You are just asking your requesting question. Over to Nga, please.
Thank you. On behalf, if one thing on behalf of the smallholder, I would say buyer and investor, please inclusive in the procurement policy and investment policy. That we not only need PFC or FSC, but we need utilizing all the existing mechanism in order to drive for sustainability. And please support and use the national system in promoting the sustainable forestry. They are in early stage and they need the support. Thank you very much.
Now, were you requesting something, or were you answering? It sounded like it could have been both.
I requesting. I know
to who?
To Ryan.
Okay,
And,
you were asking.
And yeah.
You were requesting the banking sector for more support towards these mechanisms, such as PFC, FSC, that enable sustainable trade. Okay, and finally, can I give the floor to Mr. Bunsuti? Who do you want to request as a priority area to remove barriers?
So I would like to ask Lion, because our government sector, we developed a demonstrate site about the certification practice for the smallholder or farmer. They can see and do what we can plant it or manage our forest to comply and with the requirement of PFC or something like that. So we have a little site. We have no more site. If we need to do the demonstrated site across the country, so we can get the money from Lion to do the process for the smallholder or not. Thank you, Akiko.
Great. Okay, so we had two requests to Ryan. Peter, yours wasn't really a request. It was more of a clarification, wasn't it? I'm wondering if you want to elaborate on yours a little bit to make it more of a request.
Well, well, it's all about, I mean, how the banks can put more pressure on the actors. And then in what role would, for instance, the Ifc Performance Standard play? Do they play any role at all today or not?
Okay, let's, Ryan, if you're ready, can I give the floor to you to respond to these two requests? Actually, three.
Sure.
They all came to
Yeah.
you.
I think I'm quite popular on this panel this afternoon. So I'll kick off with Peter's question. So as it relates to the IFC performance standards, we require for all of our project-related transactions that they comply with the IFC performance standards. So anytime we're investing in any sort of project or development, that is one of our basic expectations. So we need that alignment first and foremost. So, you know, that would include everything from land use to biodiversity, indigenous communities and cultural heritage, and how we apply our standards and policies in that regard. So they are actually quite important to our ENS policies. They really are one of those foundational standards that we expect all of our clients to follow. So that is one of the levers that we try to utilize to you know, influence the right you know, the right activities that we hope to see. So they are very important to us here at Standard Chartered.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other follow-up, or how does that sit with you?
No, that sounds good, because I mean that's sort of, if you're looking at new investments in this field and you require the IFC standards from the beginning, you're sort of taking a major step towards an eventual certification, either FSC or PFC. Because if you conform with those standards, you're basically there already. So you're putting the demand works from the start of the project. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just pausing to make sure there's no other perspectives coming. I'll go to Na, if you don't mind, Na, if you're ready. So Ryan asked you if the banks are doing enough for the smallholders. Great opportunity for you to tell them. What do you think?
Thanks a lot for this really nice question. From my perspective, I would say they haven't done enough, unfortunately. And they should do more. The bank have big reluctance when giving the loan for smallholder because they see a lot of risk. The smallholder have too small area, and they don't have anything much at the put in front in order to receive that. And I think another question we talk a lot in the forestry sector is about forest insurance and very low level uptake of the bank in terms of how to work in such a commodity like the forestry. So I think there are a lot of things for the bank to do more in order to encourage smallholder to apply the sustainable practice.
Okay, thanks. You could all come in with more questions. I'm also opening the floor to questions. You can either put them in the mural, or this is your opportunity to unmute your mic and speak for any of the participants. But while we're collecting questions, I'd like to ask Mr. Bunsu T. And I'm also coming from a perspective that, Peter, you put down in your presentation. You had a number of slides that had the football or the soccer field, and you talked about the unlevel playing field, where certain industry companies are abiding by certain rules and others not. So my question to Mr. Bunsuti, what is the role? What do you do as government in terms of setting a fair and even equal playing field? What are some of your priority areas that you think that the government can play a role in?
Yes, really, thank you, Kiko, for your asking this question. So government sector, as I say earlier, we also direct about the sub policy or to do compliance with the law, the governance. So the participation between the company supply side or demand side will be need to meet discuss for this area. The supply supply side can discuss with the demand side to do for the legal or sustainable supply chain. So the thing that government can do is we support the capacity building for the farmer who planted the tree. This is the best for us to give the information or the knowledge about the to do, and some system that government sector can provide for the trading system. Trading system is we got the information to the both sides to know together to have the same level of the knowledge before do the thing compliant with it, sustainable or legal. And on the government sector, again, we can also promoting when the our farmer or plantation or the plantation owner who is a smallholder, we can provide some they provide some help for them like this. Thank you. I don't know answer your question or not. Thank you all again.
Thanks, Mr. Bunsuti. If I can continue from my inspirations from your slide, Peter. Peter, you, if you have any perspectives on what you expect the government to do in terms of a level playing field. You've been working in Laos for quite a number of years. You mentioned in your slide you're working with 3,000 plus hectares. Why so small?
Well, why so small? Small but beautiful. Good growth. No, but it's a complex issue. But we work, for instance, over with 3 different provinces and 7 different districts. And what I think what I try to stress there is that we have legislation, we have regulations, but the interpretation of those laws and regulations are not the same most of the time from office to office, which makes life a bit complicated as an operator. So that's what I was referring to. Make sure the government consistently uses the rules and regulations for every actor. Then we have a level playing field. The one is, of course, that if you that's existing rules and regulations. But if you have an official best practice and you say and guidelines, say this is what you should follow, which means you have to do this, you have to do this. Then you also level the playing field from cost-wise. You know, you also have to take this extra cost to be sustainable, to consider the social aspects, the environmental aspects, and that's also a very important part of it. Then when you talk about the size of the plantation, you come into land acquisition, and that's a subject for a whole workshop in itself.
Thanks, Peter. I think you were talking also about those guidelines developed by the Land Information Working Group, a voluntary group, and the need for it to be endorsed by the government. And precisely that, without that government endorsement and the government saying that these are our rules, it's still just some standard out there that you could follow or optionally not follow. So I hear you, that's what you expect from the government. Another point that I found interesting in listening to your presentation again, Peter, and also to an earlier presentation from Mr. Zhang. There was mentioned by Mr. Zhang, we asked him also in the Q&A question about due diligence in procuring from the Lower Mekong region. His answer was, they don't buy from the Lower Mekong countries because there's no timber that's certified. On the other hand, you showed us a couple of diagrams where you say certified timber is most of what you work with. On the other hand, the buyers are not certified, or they don't expect for certified yet. So there seems to be a mismatch between the supply and demand. I mean, we're just taking two examples of many other players that are in the region, so possibly this is not representative. But do you or any of the speakers or anybody from participants have anything to say about why people here are speaking about certified timber and the buyers are speaking about the lack of certified timber?
I could start there. If we, again, talking from a Lao perspective, still the total amount of certified Lao wood on the market is, when considering the need of the Chinese buyer, very, very small. So, and it's all fast-grown eucalyptus wood. So there's a question again of demand for which species, what volumes, is it worth working with or not? So there are many aspects on that. Thank you.
So I would like to add more some in detail more information. I think when the regulation template in different countries is very, very difficult and cannot do the same thing, right? Thailand, we also thinking about this government and the plantation. I think we need to discuss together between supply chain, supply side and demand side to talking each other how we trade, the legal trade, and government sector should be set up the meeting or the participation between two sides to understand how we trade in our thinking, our discussion, our dialogue today. Legal first, government sector can provide the easily thing to the people who plantation and say that okay, this timber come from the legal source first, and legally, and many legal in supply chain. We government can provide some easy to do compliant with the law. And I mentioned earlier, we try to verify sort of for the plantation, and we can provide this information to the company or the sawmill to know this site can, this is the legal side to can use for the raw material of the company or factory. That's why sometimes we that we have heard the certification at the third party certification at PFC, FSC is very expensive. Sometimes a government sector can provide some subsidy to help them to comply and with the certification. I think the government try in Thailand do this. So when we talking with discussion with our participation and demand side, supply side, they propose this regulation need to change a little bit for easy to comply and with. So this in the floor of discussion may be useful for to all sector to give the benefit for this dialogue of the legal supporting legal and sustainable for the supply chain. I think yes, and I would like to ask more information on it. Thank you, Akiko.
If I can,
Thanks,
if I can
Mr.
also,
Go for
maybe
it.
if I can just add, yeah, thank you. You know, I think something that I was also thinking about is, you know, I think this does also highlight the need to continue to strengthen the alignment between domestic certifications and international certifications. And I think, you know, Peter's challenge earlier was a really good one, right? I mean, when we're talking about IFC and we're talking about domestic certification schemes and we're talking about government regulation, the more alignment between these things will enable more compliance and more visibility within the international schemes, right? So if we can continue to strengthen those, it helps us as banks. We feel more confident in our clients. It can also help you know, customers get to market better.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm picking up a few more questions from the mural, not directly related to what we just discussed, but here's another one that's an interesting question. Perhaps, Ryan, you could shed some light on this. It's about banking sectors and their collateral. So in Thailand, there is a bank that uses trees as collaterals. And this seems to be a very interesting case and possibly working well. Do we know about any other banks that do this? Is this something that could be expanded?
I think that's a very interesting question. I have not heard of that, so I can't speak to that specific situation. However, I mean, in terms of collateral, you know, I mean, I think it is, you know, important piece. I mean, we do take product as collateral, so I mean that is something that can be done depending on the structure and the value of the product. But yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting suggestion, and you know, probably something that could work if it's viable.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have another 10 minutes or so that we could spend on asking these questions. I'd like to encourage people to raise questions, possibly directly by unmuting. Can I open the floor for questions? Questions are also welcome to provide any perspectives that you'd like to share, directly related or a new perspective to add to this panel discussion. I see some smiles in the RFD room. Do you want to go?
Yes, I just want to add to your point quickly, Akiko, on the tree for collateral. This is with the Bank of Agriculture of Thailand. Although most of the implementation are in the initiative stage, what the bank here worried the most is how the information is accurate and reflect the forest stock of smallholders. So in this case, government of Thailand, particularly RFD, is trying to do more due diligence and and developing the digital forest stock form so that smallholders can have a better traceability form that can be used for the banking sector. Thanks, Kiko.
Go ahead.
Okay, much better. Okay, that's just a comment on control timber. I think that is a good option for smallholders to participate in the timber supply chain. However, smallholders cannot decide whether they can go on control timber or certification. It is decided by consumers and companies. So that's my comment, and that is why in Vietnam there is very limited area where smallholders can use the control timber to participate in the timber supply chain.
Thanks, Dr. Zhang. Yes, we are trying to work on control wood as a phased approach to certification. We do realize that certification in smallholders is not the best combination because of these high cumbersome requirements as well as high costs. So how do we bring in control wood as our controlled sources as a step towards certification, as Nga from PFC elaborated from us. I'd like to invite colleagues from FSC, Cindy, Jaco, to come in if you'd like. We've heard a little bit about the PFC side of things, but also we're working on a collaboration with FSC to start soon. So if you have any perspectives to share.
Yeah, maybe I can go first. This is Jaco from FSC Asia Pacific. Thanks a lot, Akiko. So for FSC, we are doing the forest certification, and we also realized from my market perspective that the gap between the buyers and suppliers, and also even the certified suppliers among FSC certifications, that they don't really know each other. And so we would like to close the gap and help connect them among the certificate FSC certified suppliers, and also FSC certified suppliers to international and regional buyers. And that's why we are going to have the project with FAO on the Sustainable Tropical Timber Trade Network, and also to create the info hub to help people to understand more about FSC certifications, legality requirement in plain English, and also will be translated into different languages like Vietnamese, Thai, Chinese, and other languages. And so regarding the smallholder certification, that we will have the regional forest stewardship standard that we have been developing for 4 countries, specifically in this region for the smallholders, which have the management area smaller than 20 hectares. So I saw my colleague Kuan, that she is the country manager based in Hanoi, that also explained the RFSS could actually certify the non-timber forest product, because the regional forest stewardship standard is actually a simplified version of our FSC national standard. So that would be like helping the smallholders to get FSC certifications in a lower cost, and easier for them to understand what FSC certifications means to them with simple English, and also the requirements will be simplified for the smallholders specifically. And this will be the thing that I would like to add to the group here. And Cindy, do you have any other additional information or comment to add?
Hi, hello. Hi, everybody. This is Cindy. Thank you, Jaco. Yes, we understand this is a great event, getting the stakeholders together to talk about the issues in this region. And for FSC part, we understand all these challenges from the forest all the way to the market. So we try to, in the coming year, launch a couple of initiatives to work towards that, closing these gaps. And as Jaco mentioned, RFSS is one of our key initiatives, and we will be rolling it out in a systematic way in the 4 selected countries accordingly next year. And our aim is actually to move beyond. So next year will be an exciting year for us to work on the FM area. And moreover, we also, the collaboration between FSC and FAO on the forest tropical, excuse me, tropical forest trade network, that would be a very key milestone for us to connect. I mean, we help on the ground, but then we also need to connect to provide the market to the smallholders to ensure that we have a thorough train from the forest to the consumer. So this is another major key initiative for us in the APAC. So we look forward to collaborating with all of you in the coming year to move these two key projects of FSC onward. And on top of that, we also have control wood that we're working on, control wood certification, as just Akiko mentioned, as the kind of intermediate scaling up mechanism for FM unit that they can, in a systematic step-by-step way, to move up the certification ladder. And we also have group certification to help with different scenarios as well. So hoping that with FSC innovative approach, we can provide solutions to different scenarios, different countries, and work with all different stakeholders to reach our mission. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Jaco. Coming back a little bit to control wood and smallholder groups, can I give the floor to Nga again? She has a question.
Thanks, Akiko. So I would ask a question to Ryan because we have discussed about wood control source at the stepwise approach. And I think it would be really practical for smallholders. So I would like to ask you, Ryan, that how familiar you or the bank with this concept, and whether the bank policy is going to open to this claim as well, not only the full certification. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Na, and I'll be completely candid. I am not very familiar with the concept. So I think if I look forward on kind of where our position statements are and where there could be opportunities, you know, that could be an opportunity, and we do review things quite frequently. So you know, as we look for ways to continue to strengthen our positions, whether it's control wood or something else, we will always consider that when we do.
Great, thank you very much. So we're gonna have follow-up conversation on the topic then. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, would love it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Great. Okay, I think that was a great way to end the panel discussion. So thank you all panelists. Thank you for all your active participation also through the mural. We have 15 minutes left in this regional dialogue. And I'd just like to reflect back on what we've been discussing before I hand over for our closing remarks. So just scrolling through the agenda, maybe you can do this too on your own screens. We opened the dialogue with some comments from Mario and Leif Yon about the work so far that our project has done, but also reflecting on the statements from the Glasgow COP26. And the need to respond and also to work with those commitments that were made in Glasgow. We visited a bit about what our region is looking like when we step back and look at the statistics in terms of forest products and trade, in terms of forest cover and emissions, in terms of finance and flows thereof. We then visited the supply and demand side. First with the supply, we heard from Zhang as a Chinese company, one of the biggest in terms of importing of sawn timber and OSB, about their needs and inability to currently supply from the lower Mekong. We heard from Anders and Ryan from respective perspectives on financing and their standards they use to ensure that their lending is done to responsible and sustainable legal supply chains. We heard from Peter and then Nga, representing the supply side. And Peter gave us very clear pictures of his supply chain, where he works with plantations in Laos and working with certified plantations, but unable to sell these as actually the certified material that they actually are. He told us many times that the unlevel playing field is an issue and the role of the government in ensuring that that is changed. And then Nga from PFC shared with us the lessons from Vietnam in coming together with smallholders and engaging in smallholder group certification using control wood as a stepwise approach to certification. And a vibrant panel discussion between the four perspectives, fortunately without David from Recoft. So, which leads us to our closing remarks. And in this closing remarks, sorry, yes, oh, sorry, just one slide back, please. Yes. Okay, so before we go to the closing remarks, I do want to tell everybody that we had today was the regional dialogue, and actually this regional dialogue is supported by 5 country sessions as well. This is the first part, and then it's continued on to the country sessions. We have respective country sessions in the 5 countries on the dates that are mentioned in the slide. 17th of December for Cambodia, Laos, and 16th for Myanmar, and then Thailand and Vietnam on the 15th of December. These will be held in country. Some of them will be physical meetings, and most of them will have, all of them will have an online element to the meetings. So if you are interested, please reach out to our national project coordinators in each of these countries, and you are more than welcome to join. With that, I would like to move on to our closing remarks, and I'm pleased to invite Astrid Agostini, our lead from the UN Red Cluster from FAO. Astrid, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Akiko, and thank you so much to all the participants in this regional dialogue. It's been such a rich exchange, and it's been really exciting, I think, for everyone to hear from each other, from all the different actors in the forestry industry and supply chain, and to also have a better understanding, really, of the aspirations, but also some of the challenges and difficulties, and yet that continued commitment to try and drive things forward. And we've had this opportunity to really hear these diversity of perspectives from smallholders to governments, from the finance industry, looking at supply and demand sides, those that are feeding some of the growing demand in China, and of course also industry players in other countries, such as in Vietnam. And there have been many challenges that have been highlighted here. But one of the key things, and really that can drive our ambition going forward, is this strong confirmation that there clearly is a demand for legal and sustainable timber. And with that, it's clear that our challenge will be to find a way to bring this demand and the supply side together and make sure that this is a viable option and will be the most viable option. And we've heard about some of the key tools here, of course, about certification, including group certification, that can be an opportunity. Also specifically for smallholders to enter into sustainable legal supply chains. We've heard about specific standards and initiatives that are being put in place in the finance industry that are trying really to incentivize, but also put good international practice into the specific operations of the finance industry, and also bring that to the local level and bring that to the national financing side. And what's been particularly exciting, I think, has been to see this exchange also in the panel, with the possibility for different stakeholders with different perspectives to put questions and requests to each other. And I hope that this is a good impetus going forward. We see, of course, that there remains a large gap still between smallholders and the multitude of the SMEs and responsible landers and the global buyers that really want to drive this responsible supply chains. And it's still the easier, simpler solution is still the unsustainable and illegal one. And so we need to continue to work to make this more profitable, to make it easier, and to link a solid supply and demand. We have had, I think, great food for thought in this regional session today to feed also then into more detailed discussions in the country dialogues that you just mentioned, Akiko, because of course it's in this initiative, I think this is really exciting because there are clearly regional dimensions, clear regional dimensions to the challenges and to the solutions here, but then also there's very particular context in different countries, so we need to be able to support action at both levels, at the national and at the regional level, and obviously coordinate that across the region. What's been also very exciting, I think, is to see the excellent network that the project has been able to put together. Already, we've seen here in the regional dialogue between different stakeholders, contact persons, and this is really a huge asset that I think we need to try and use going forward in order to be able to then both further elaborate on the understanding of challenges and opportunities, but then also to really drive action, because we know this is not going to be a quick fix. This is not going to happen through some quick action. It's going to be a long-standing, ongoing process. But in order to move there, we need to take the next step, and we're very excited that, of course, we've had the approval also from our financing partners, Norway, for a no-cost extension of this project going into 2022. And we see this coming year, of course, as a critical one to move on action going forward. In particular, of course, engaging with the governments in all the countries, and we hope it's going to be a little bit easier. We've, of course, really been struggling with the challenges posed by COVID in terms of driving some of the dialogue and making this a much more person-to-person and in-country process, and we hope there will be new opportunities this coming year. We'll pay particular attention and really focus a lot, particularly on rosewood as one of the commodities that has been identified as particularly important. And another key area to emphasize next year will be precisely on the relations and dialogue with China, looking at this supply chains into China and the different roles of financiers, the buyers, and looking at the ability to work with those to really trigger the transition to sustainable supply chains. We have the great momentum of the international agenda, and of course, as you highlighted again, the Glasgow COP has been really created great new momentum with the leaders' declaration on forests and with the US-China declaration. So we have great entry points in terms of global commitment. And here we have excellent momentum also coming from this dialogue for concrete action in this particular region. So I'll wrap up here and really want to thank from my side all the participants in the dialogue, and we're very excited from FAO with our partners in UN-RED to move this forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Astrid. Next, I'd like to invite Steve Swan, coordinator from the UNEP side of the UN-RED program. Steve?
Akiko, can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed.
I see Astrid nodding. Thank you very much. So I have the unenviable task to have the final words after everyone has already said pretty much everything that might need to be said over the last 3 hours. It's been a real honor to join you today, not just a real honor, but also a real pleasure, because my career started in the Mekong region, and I spent a good 15, nearly 20 years of my life working there, starting in the forests and then with smallholders and then with national governments. So it's great to be virtually back in the region with you today. Normally, I work with my colleague Astrid here, and Mario, you heard at the beginning, on the forest carbon value chain. So for those who are tracking the effectiveness of this workshop, your original objective was to get us to deepen our understanding on the challenges, opportunities, and solutions for sustainable timber in the region, with a focus on smallholders. Well, absolutely, I can claim that my understanding has been deepened on this particular challenge. I'm less than 1% of your participants, though, I see. I've been tracking throughout the event. You've had over 100 participants maintained over the last 3 hours. So the first thing I really want to do is just to congratulate the team and you as a collective constituency for coming together despite these operational challenges that Life John was telling us at the beginning, to bring us all together and have this dialogue. The participatory nature, the engagement with different formats across different platforms has been really stimulating. It's been great to see such a diversity of participants and partners, some old, some new. So common it is for us working in forest protection, biodiversity conservation, to bring the same stakeholders that are already convinced and working on sustainability issues, and to have a diverse range from investors, suppliers, producers, demand side, smallholder perspectives. I think it's been a very rich discussion across the 5 countries of the Lower Mekong. Great to see government representatives also being present throughout the discussion. I particularly appreciated that panel exchange that was happening. I thought that was a very lively discussion back and forth across those different representatives of different actors along the value chain. And then the mural itself, such a rich body of material that the program has now got to digest. I'm not even going to attempt to try and summarize any of all that material. That's a job to do after the workshop. So I think it's a very complex discussion and dialogue that you've taken on. The interconnectedness of the forest sector, the timber industry in your region. We've seen the challenges of those fragmented, from one end of the supply chain, the financing flows, through to fragmented standards and fragmented supply at different scales, commercial and smallholder. And all of this is something that I see the Lower Mekong project trying to bring together, to try and move forward with action on multiple fronts across that value chain: the supply side, the demand side, the investors, and particularly the smallholders. So looking forward, I know you've heard these comments maybe a bit already, but I think I'd like to reiterate the 2 sort of points that Mario made right at the beginning when he set you off on this journey for this discussion today. Firstly, UNRED is here for you. And secondly, now is the time to act. So as we've just heard from Astrid reiterating, UNRED is here. We've got a no-cost extension to this project. The overall program, with the generous support of Norway, is funded through to 2025. And we're actively mobilizing resources for new initiatives. So for example, in this region, we have secured some initial Swiss funding to look at sustainable forest management interventions for the ASEAN region, working with the ASEAN Secretariat. So there are plenty of new opportunities opening up through the program. There has been some discussion of this program, the Lower Mekong one, expanding into a second phase. There's a sort of ongoing discussion, and it might be something that's worth exploring, despite all the challenges along this one value chain of timber, to maybe look at others, acknowledging that agriculture is being the principal driver in the region, as it is globally. Commercial agricultural expansion. There are multiple cash crops in the region that are implicated. But I'd look perhaps in summary just to the point that Leifjon made right at the beginning of perhaps one of the most important ones being rubber. So there may be interest, and I leave that with you as an open-ended question, whether you'd be looking to explore other value chains in a possible second phase. So that's something about UNRED being here for you, supporting ongoing opportunities. And then collectively, beyond that, internationally, the moment is now. As we heard right at the beginning from Mario, Astrid was just reminding us from Glasgow just 1 month ago, the declaration, 20 million pledge, 1.20 billion, sorry, pledge, 1.7 billion for local people's engagement in forest protection. And we've been talking very much here about how to get smallholders engaged in the supply chain. The US-China commitment to eliminating illegal logging. We heard from Anders right at the beginning about all the international commitment from the investor side, alliances, pledges, policies, standards, task forces. And all of that is packaged up to see we've got a series of milestone moments coming over 2022 where we can take opportunity, and this is what I'd leave you with, I think collectively as a sort of community of practice, as actors along a value chain, look to really demonstrate action at scale. Start capturing and communicating your success and bringing those to these milestone events, such as the World Forest Congress, such as G20 hosted by Indonesia, the COP at the end of the year, the climate change COP, and really try and showcase the efforts you're making to bring sustainability to the timber value chain in your region. And with that, I'll close out just to say good luck with it, moving into the country dialogues where you'll get into the granular specifics of each country's specific country details, and wish you all the success. As Astrid was just saying, the default business as usual, simpler and easier option is to stay unsustainable and illegal. It's an uphill effort for all actors on the value chain to connect and move us into a sustainable production model. Thank you, everyone. It's been a real pleasure, and I leave it with Akiko to wrap up and close out. Good luck.
Thanks, Steve. You have done all the wrapping up there is to be done. Thank you both, Astrid and Steve. We are here, the UN program is here, and now is the time to act, and we will act. But we'd like to first take a little bit of a break. It is 6:30 in Japan, 4:30 in Bangkok, and it's been an early morning for all of you participants from Europe. So let me thank you gratefully for spending the last 3 hours with us, and actively is that too. We'll be recording everything that you've done in the mural and trying to understand and deepen our understanding further as well. All our presentations and videos are available, and they have been sent to you in a PDF document. There's a link that was sent to you in the calendar invite, and we're happy to share it again. If you don't have it, just let us know and we'll share it with you again. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you again.